Welcome. This is our second session of the deep dive series for 2025-2026, and the last session was all the way back in October. So it's been a while. We're going to quickly review some of the takeaways from the first session, but also we'll make sure that you have access to the first session recording and all of the resources we shared in the first session as well. So if you weren't able to make it or you really don't remember what happened back in October, that's me. You can go ahead and watch that when we leave here today. A quick agenda of what we're going to go over. We're going to have some framing and grounding. We're going to talk about, we have Dr. Allegra Johnson. I'll introduce her in a minute, but she's going to go through a systems view of inclusion for residency programs, as well as helping each program asset map. One of the biggest takeaways we had, if you were here in October, you probably remember that we had a webinar format and not a meeting format. And so therefore we couldn't put you all in breakout rooms. We fixed that today. Today we will have breakout rooms. So because of that, you're going to have some like hands-on activities, things you can talk through with people in your groups. One of those is going to be asset mapping. Then in the middle of our session, we're going to have a panel discussion. We'll have a quick break, and then you will have another activity where you will look at using your asset map that you worked on a little bit, like what are your next steps as a program? And then we will close out. So if you missed our first session, which was in October, I'm going to review that soon. Today, we're going to really talk about what does an inclusive special education residency look like and general education residency, like how do those programs work together? And then we have one more session, which is going to be in April, which we're going to take kind of the first two series and like close it out with some actionable steps for you guys as programs. Okay, so in the first session, we had a couple different takeaways. It was really data heavy. We talked about kind of why is it important to build inclusive residency programs from a special education and a general education lens. The first big takeaway was that inclusive teacher preparation really requires intentional collaboration between general and special education. So strong special and general education residency programs really design their coursework, their clinical practice, their mentor training, all of the things together. They find every opportunity that they can to make sure that there is cross-program collaboration. The second big takeaway was that inclusion works best when systems are designed proactively, not retroactively. And what that means is, making sure that your gen ed and your special education programs, teacher education programs, are intentionally designing and using UDL principles, MTSS, and Tier 1 instruction, training for your gen ed and special ed teachers together. So making sure that all of those things are happening at the same time for everyone, modeling inclusion in teacher education is incredibly impactful. Our third big takeaway was we were looking at the data. So we were looking at special education placements for students, but also the teacher demographics as well as the student demographics and comparing those and understanding kind of the equity issues behind the demographics of our student and teacher populations in California. And there was a resource that was shared, I believe it's from the CDE, where you can look at the disproportionality data from your specific region. So I'm just reminding people that that's there. If you would ever like to reference it, it is in our resources document. And lastly, our fourth big takeaway is that residency programs can strengthen their inclusive preparation through 5 key design areas. And we talked about all of these: sharing clinical practice, integrating your coursework between gen ed and special ed, co-developing your mentor training, sharing assessment and improvement processes, and recruiting your candidates together. So recruiting gen ed and special ed candidates together. So we're going to have a quick connector. We're going to put you in breakout rooms for about probably 5 minutes. I know the timer says 10, but we're going to do 5. And I just want you to kind of reflect, introduce yourself, your role, and your your institution, and then maybe just talk a little bit about, I know you're not going to get to all four of these questions, so pick one that really stands out to you, but what is an area that your program already supports inclusion well? And remember, we're talking about inclusive special ed and general education teacher preparation. So not necessarily like, you know, um, students like in a K-12 setting, but your inclusive practices in your teacher education programs. What is one area where collaboration could grow? Or what is one question that you're hoping that this specific series will answer? So we're going to put you in breakout rooms. Welcome back. I know that 5 minutes feels really short in a breakout room, and you probably didn't all get to share, but I will assure you that you will get time in the breakout room with the same people again throughout the day. So if you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, or you were like left with a really interesting comment that got cut off right in the middle of the sentence, that always happens, just know that you can come back to it. The thing that is on the screen right now is the collective resume that we made last time. So if you were here last time, we had an activity where everybody went into a Padlet because remember we couldn't do breakout rooms. We went into a Padlet and we shared like what experience that you have in inclusion. From that, Brooke took all of that information and made a collective resume about who was in the room and what experience everybody is bringing, which is super exciting because it's really nice to see like the number of years of experience that we all collectively have in inclusion and special education and things that we feel will um, deepen our learning here in these deep dives. And so I just want to highlight that. I also want to recognize that this is probably not reflective of this specific group because we might have new people and things like that. But it is really cool to see anyway. So we wanted to make sure we shared that with you all. And so it was really cool to see that lots of people have different experience and but all of these things are relevant in when we're talking about inclusive programs. So take a look at this and just remember that, sometimes people come into these spaces and they're like, I don't know what we're talking about. I'm not sure if I have anything to contribute to this conversation. And I just want to remind you that you do. We all have something to contribute to this conversation. And because you're here, we all have something to learn from you. So just remember that in these conversations today. And we are so excited to have you all in this space. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to today's presenter. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Allegra Johnson, whose mission it is to help schools create learning spaces where the presence of every learner is affirmed and celebrated. With more than a decade of experience as a special educator, district leader, and adjunct professor, Dr. Johnson focuses on the mindsets, coaching practices, and collaborative structures that make inclusive education possible. Her work centers on helping adults shift beliefs and practices so that our students with learning disabilities can thrive in general education classrooms. And with that, I will pass it off to Dr. Johnson.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Hello, hello. I'm super, super excited to be here with you today. So our intended outcomes for the session today is for us really to just understand what are some of the core components of inclusive residency design, to give you some opportunity and space to really think about your own program through a systems lens and identify different assets and, priority gaps that could be innovated and like iterated on. The hope is that at the end of the session, you'll be able to draft one alignment move that you would like to pilot to make your current program a little bit more intentionally focused on providing inclusive opportunities for all of your residents. So the core question we really want to think about today is what would an inclusive residency program look like, sound like, and feel like for your residents? And as Kate had mentioned in the very beginning, we're not just talking about your special education residents, really all of your residents. Because when we think about what it will look like once they move into their first placement and they are teaching, inclusion happens through real intentional and consistent collaboration between our general education and our special education teachers. So how are we kind of backwards designing our programs to make sure that all of our residents get the experience that they need? Again, as Kate had mentioned, this is not really a webinar style presentation. This is really meant to be more of a workshop. And so wanted to offer some learning community norms that I use in a lot of the professional development that I facilitate. Um, in the interest of time, I'm not going to read out all of the norms to you, but go ahead and take a look at them and just think about, we're going to be in this space together collaboratively, really looking at some assets in our current programs and then maybe some opportunities for growth. Which one of these learning community norms would be really important for you to lean into today to make the session really, really important and impactful for you? So go ahead and take a couple of seconds and think about which one of these norms would be really helpful for you in this moment. And if you would, I would love it if you would drop it in the chat. Action is not a prerequisite for participation. Thank you, Kat, for starting us off. Maybe get a couple more. All right, perfect. No one knows everything, but together we know a lot, allowing more than one thing to be true. I love it. Courageously embracing possibility. Love it, love it, love it. And so to start us off, what I would just like to name is that I am really approaching this work with two lenses. One being that I am a sitting special education administrator working in the K-12 system, really working to, really doing the work of like supporting our general education and our special education teams in creating the most inclusive opportunities for our students with IEPs. I also have been an adjunct professor in the Alder Graduate School of Education program for the last 5 years or so. And so I definitely have a lot of experience around working with residents on the course side, helping them with their kind of application, their field work. And then we've even hired some residents, after they've gone through the program and thinking about what does it mean to support them as a new teacher. And so I just want to offer both of those frames as we go through the presentation today. And so, one of the things that I have definitely noticed in both systems is that when we are thinking about improving systems, typically we just jump to like what's not working. But in system design, especially when we're thinking about inclusion, sustainable change is going to be so much more important than just rapid change. And sustainable change really starts off by thinking about where are assets and what is strong about what we're already doing so that we can leverage that and build upon that. And so when we're thinking about a systems view for designing inclusive residency programs, I think our inclusive programs really need to align around three different systems. Those being what's our instructional system, what's our case management and support system, and what are like the cultural and relational systems that exist within the program to really start to build the knowledge and disposition that our teachers are going to need to be able to really facilitate inclusion effectively for students with IEPs. So thinking about the first system, in our inclusive classrooms, teachers are constantly making a lot of design decisions. They're thinking about how their lessons need to be structured, how access points are created for different learners, and then how to support students with IEPs really proactively within their instruction. And one pattern that I have noticed both in residency programs and also within schools is that inclusion is usually discussed really conceptually, but residents and teachers aren't always given really explicit practices to use to translate what is in an IEP into their day-to-day teaching practice. And so, what I would like to offer to you is that a strong, inclusive residency program really needs to intentionally connect these pieces so that residents can learn how to design lessons using tools like Universal Design for Learning, being able to proactively incorporate IEP accommodations, and really thinking about IEPs as like an instructional decision-making tool and not just a compliance tool so that it can, really proactively drive their instruction. So what this looks like on the program side is that when we talk about inclusion with our residents, we're not talking about inclusion as like a placement decision that we're making for students, but really as a intentional design decision that we are engaging in as teachers. But talking about inclusion from an instructional standpoint really is just the first step for putting our residents in a position to be able to do this work meaningfully. The second system I think that we need to pay real specific attention to is really thinking about supporting our residents with being able to navigate through the IEP process. So, from my experience as a school leader, what I often see with our new teachers, both our new general education and special education teachers, is they feel very overwhelmed about the complexities of case management and engaging in the IEP process. So things like progress monitoring, documentation, participating in IEP meetings, these things feel really daunting to our new teachers because they didn't get any experience with it within their preparation programs. And so, again, what I would like to offer is that a strong inclusive residency program really works to create opportunities for residents to move through a progression of first observing these processes, then, co-practicing these processes with their mentor teachers, and then really moving into like leading some of these processes independently, towards the end of their residency experience. So that when they do go into that first year of teaching, these don't feel like foreign activities, but things that they have a little bit of muscle memory around. And then lastly, what I would also like to offer is just thinking about what are the cultures of collaboration that we're intentionally you know, um, cultivating within our programs. This one, kind of forms a little bit more quietly in the background, but residents are constantly learning about what's considered normal within schools based off of the programming that we provide to them. And so, if they are going through their residency experience, really feeling like general education and special education operate in really separate lanes, they absorb that sense of, or lack of collaboration really quickly. But when collaboration is really the norm, there are opportunities for shared planning, there's some scaffolding around co-teaching, there's explicit conversations around what does it sound like to engage in joint problem solving. That becomes a norm that they will eventually carry into their first year of teaching. And so, in my work supporting inclusive schools, the most successful environments aren't necessarily the ones that have the most amount of resources or staff, but they are the ones where the staff is working together on a very consistent and, effective basis to really share the responsibility of creating inclusive environments for all students. And I do believe that residency programs offer a really unique opportunity to support our residents with shaping this kind of culture really early on in their teacher development. And so from again this dual lens that I'm kind of bringing to this experience that we're having together right now, a pattern that I've really noticed across both K-12 spaces and also our higher ed spaces is that when we think about improvement, again, we're kind of default to thinking about, what's missing or what's wrong before or, as like the starting point instead of thinking about our assets. But in systems work, again, particularly around inclusion, I think when we think about sustainable change and growth, we really want to start with what is already existing really successfully. And so, in the first activity that we're going to jump into together today, and let me open up the chat. Has the worksheet? Yes, perfect. The resources have already been dropped into the chat for you. We are going to engage in an activity that's asset mapping. A really important reframe that I would like to offer to you here is that oftentimes when there are challenges around inclusion, it can sometimes be interpreted as folks' lack of commitment. But in my experience, both as a district leader and then also in teacher preparation, I think that that's actually really rarely the case. Most often, the issue is that the roles and expectations and the structures around inclusion just haven't really clearly been defined and how they can support inclusive practices. And so that means that the work in front of us isn't really about convincing people that inclusion is the way to move forward, but it's really more around designing the different structures that we need to make it easier to carry this work forward. And so when you open up the handout, you'll see that there are four different areas that I'm going to ask you to reflect on: structural, human, experiential, vision, and values. There are some examples that are offered to you to help jumpstart your thinking. But I would really love for you to take time in your breakout room to reflect individually and then collectively about where within these four different categories do you see work towards inclusion happening and happening really well. After you have that opportunity to share and reflect with one another, we're going to come back and quickly debrief in the chat, and then we'll move on to our first panel discussion. Before we transition into the panel, I would love to hear from folks in the chat just which of the asset categories felt the strongest in your program right now. So is it a structural asset, a human asset, an experiential asset, or a values asset? What is really reflective and representative of your commitment to inclusive education for your residents in your program right now? Thank you, Jenna, for getting us started. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Brooke, who is going to introduce our panelists and facilitate a really amazing panel for us.
Great. Thanks, Allegra. All right, so since we've just spent a little bit of time identifying the assets that are present in your systems, this next conversation is going to highlight how one program's assets have really come to life in practice. And I'm pleased to introduce Audrey Frank, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources in Escondido Union School District, and Dr. Jody Robledo, Professor and Program Coordinator at CSU San Marcos. I want to thank them both for being here today. Let's just sort of jump in and kind of highlight some of the amazingness that's going on over in your neck of the woods. We've all talked in length about strong partnership and how the strongest ones really are the ones that share a clear purpose. And so in your collaboration, how did you align around a shared commitment to inclusive practices for students, and sort of what helped that partnership move from an idea into the real work?
Jody, you want to talk about your program a little bit?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you everyone for having us. And thank you. I've been hanging out here since 10, hearing some amazing things about inclusive practices and residency programs, and heard some nice things also in our breakout session. So you guys are doing amazing work. Thank you. So I'm Dr. Jody Robledo. I'm from Cal State San Marcos, and we have talking a little bit about our credential program in special education, but ours is a little unique. It's a dual credential program, so all of our candidates receive both our multiple subject credential and then one or both education specialist credentials, either the mild, moderate support needs and or extensive support needs. So we always look for partners who are there to support a dual credential candidate, which can get complicated because, like we were talking in our last breakout room, some of the structural policies in our credentialing systems and in our districts and with residency grants and with teacher preparation standards are somewhat restricting in terms of welcoming a more dual credentialed inclusive program. We were talking in the breakout room. I was saying, oh, the biggest mistake we ever made was creating separate credentials, because why wouldn't we segregate in our schools if that's how we prepare them to be teachers as teacher preparation? So we kind of have some challenges and to overcome together as collaborative partners. And I think that's what we've found in Escondido, is that we understand some of the challenges that we've had to face and how our teachers are prepared and how the residency grant has been written and how we need to kind of comply with those requirements while also promoting inclusive dual credential programs. And in my experience, I've worked with many other districts around residencies, and some have been not as collaborative or as creative in making this really work for both the candidate and the district and the institute. But Escondido has absolutely stepped up to kind of be that district for us, and that's because we've had a very long partnership with them. They live in our neighborhood, they're right next door. Our candidates grow up and go through their schools, and our candidates want to come back and work in their schools. So it's part of our community, and we've always had a strong relationship with Escondido, both for general ed teachers and for special ed teachers. We've come to the district to, back many years ago when everyone had to have their autism added authorization. We were in the district office, making sure all the credentialed teachers got that required coursework and came right to them. And so we've always had that really collaborative process, and something that Audrey and I have gone through is, really making it work for candidates who want both mild, moderate, and extensive support needs, but also come with their multiple subject credential and will need to get support in all of those areas. I also think when they're teaching, it's just before they start the residency program with Escondido, they already finished their multiple subject credential. So they are very well versed in UDL and MTSS and all of those things that might be very new to a teacher who's just in a standalone credential. So they're already very much prepared and feel very comfortable in general education. So having them a part of co-teaching, having them a part of student study teams, all those things are just natural because they've already spent a year in schools.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't spent a year in residencies because it's been tricky to find a residency program where you can do more than just special ed or general ed. So I do see restrictions there. So if we truly want to be inclusive, we have to allow for more flexibility in that grant, because it's just too restricting to welcome, programs that might have unique programs like I do with dual to triple to credential candidates, because we have to be able to allow that, so we don't kind of restrict ourselves with they have to be assigned to one teacher or, so there's a lot of restrictions there. But with all those restrictions, Audrey's always like, okay, well, let's figure this out and case by case and let's make it work. And that's really, so she can speak to that in terms of how she's designed the residency program to be flexible to meet everybody's needs.
And Audrey, thank you, Jody. I appreciate that. You guys have such a unique partnership. And so I'm really excited for folks to learn from both sides of this partnership. And so Audrey, with your lens, can you bring us into that, your perspective from like the classroom level, and share some of those examples of what this all looks like in practice for you?
Great. Yes. Thank you. And hello, everybody, from sunny San Diego. So our residency model is not unique. We have begged, borrowed, and stealed from great residency programs all across the state. So we have the para model. So every pair, and so like in the case of Cal State San Marcos, we have a teacher who has a multiple subject credential. They come into our residency program and they become a special education para. And then they work in the class with their mentor teacher from before school starts all the way to the last day of school, with a gradual release model. And then throughout that entire program, that resident is walking alongside the mentor. And in about March, April, then they will take over the class. But they are doing all of the PD. So they are working with our residency mentor. They are collaborating with our special ed department, and they are getting support from our induction program. So they're working with special education and general education teachers on not only practice, a curriculum, but practice to be a good teacher. So they're getting it from every single way. They, it's really about that collaboration. We also have in our schools, we have on-site collaboration days where special ed and general ed collaborate together on curriculum, on needs of students in fourth grade. So there is constant collaboration between general education and special education at every single level, from the district support all the way down to the site support, and between teachers. Does that help?
Yes. And please share, when we first met, we were talking about, tell us a little bit about your program and like this uniqueness about your program. Audrey, what did you say when we were talking about it?
Well, to me, it's kind of like a no duh. Like, why would we why would we segregate everybody? It has to come together, because just because you're a fourth grade separate class autism teacher, you could be in a Common Core class for us, which means that those students are getting grade level curriculum. Who best to collaborate with than their fourth grade peers? So to keep it such a segregated model doesn't help anybody. And even if you have a skill where you're in fourth grade and the kid's working at a first grade level, then you need to be collaborating with first grade teachers to see, what are you doing? How are you making it work? How are you differentiating? How are you providing small group instruction? All of those things, we're helping each other. And believe me, special education teachers have a wealth of knowledge about behavior, how to differentiate, and to give that to their general education peers. Again, for me, it's a no duh. But I realize that what I think is a no duh is not for everybody. So I'm learning.
I loved that part. It was when we were first chatting and she was like, no duh. I'm like, it's not a no duh, but I love that it's not a no duh. Or I love that it is like duh for you. And I love that it's just woven into what you do in your district, and the match of working with an IHE partner that understands that and sees, the value in working with an LEA partner that also finds innovation and flexibility and like, let's figure this out. We know where our, parameters are, but like, how do we work around that? And so with that, because I know we want us to have some time for folks to ask some Q&A, but for this last kind of, as we close out our discussion, for residency programs that are trying to strengthen inclusive practices through partnerships such like yours, what are some lessons or challenges that you would like them to know about?
You have to say, I was thinking as you were speaking, it really is about being flexible. And Jody, you said that. We've had a couple of residents from Cal State San Marcos they already have their gen ed and they want their MSN and their ESN. Okay, so how do we make that work? What side is good? What teacher already is dual credentialed? How do they get experience in all of the classes and collaborate with their general ed partners? It's a tricky little, we're threading the needle, but I mean, isn't it going to make that teacher so much stronger for us? They're going to be working for us. We have need. We're able to fill with amazing residents who are now full-blown general ed or special education teachers and are amazing. So I guess, again, it's a no doubt thing for me. We have to figure it out.
Yeah, I agree with Audrey. It really is individualized. We really have met and collaborated about every single resident, and we both know, who they work with, when they work with them, like the intimate details of their experience. We are both collaboratively a part of, along with our other supports in our district and our university supervisors. So it really is about like, how can we make this is very unique. Like everyone is very unique, and everyone's situation, what credentials they're getting, who they're with, what their strengths are, what their needs are. And it's almost like we're building IEPs for our residents, where we have to like, this is the type of support this candidate needs. This is the type of support that candidate needs. So we're pulling in our own training as teachers to support them. But yeah, I think Escondido, the thing that what I love about it, it's like, okay, let's meet, let's figure this out. Like there's never, I don't think I've ever heard Audrey say no. She always says, "Oh, okay, well, let's meet. We'll brainstorm." Like it's always a brainstorm. It's never a absolutely not. That's not what this said. That's not what this district wants, or that's not what. It's always been a let's figure this out, and so that's so valued for me.
That's amazing. Can I ask feedback from mentors or principals or completers? What impact has this had on retention and satisfaction in your districts?
So this is the second year of our resident group. Last year we had four residents, and we probably had maybe 6 to 8 mentors apply. When we did it for this year, we had about 18 people apply, and we took 6 because it's unique, right? We need it has to be a unique group of people, and we had over 30 mentors apply. So word's getting around and they understand. And there are a lot of people who see the value and have taken a lot of extra time to work with the residents and really walk alongside. So it's been, we only see that we're getting better and they're getting better too.
Yeah, that's phenomenal, especially. And I think it's easy for that to naturally happen in your setting because of how collaborative you all are. And so not only does just the mentor have access, I mean, the resident has access to all of the different classrooms and teachers. And sometimes we see it where not everyone knows who the resident is on campus. And clearly that's not what's happening on your sites. And so I think that's a really phenomenal data point to share. So,
and I think it started small and it's growing, but it's not growing at a like, whoosh, it's very meaningful in terms of the growth rate. Whereas I've been in other residencies where we've had many more candidates and it has been too rushed too quickly until we worked out the kinks. So having a smaller residency last year and then growing a little bit this year has allowed it to kind of progress without kind of losing the value of the program. So and Escondido works with other institutes of higher ed. So it's like that can be very complex for them because they have to manage what, 3 other institutes do with teacher credentialing, which is very different. So, and we're the only one, I think, that's a dual credential program. So, and then they take that into induction when they support the candidates. They support them through induction and support them through both general and special education induction. So that's also a nice wraparound package that they offer.
Yeah, Audrey, you were sharing your induction programs ran through your districts. You have them all the way through. Yeah.
And because the induction supports the residents as residents, they're already kind of getting them ready because they know what they're going to need for induction. So they understand they just fold right in. And that's been very, very helpful. And all of the resident mentors or all of our next mentors, our induction mentors know who they are.
Yeah. And I'm going to pull a question from the chat that's directly connected to induction. Janice asked, is the para somehow able to obtain early completion option as you mentioned induction? Do you have any residents that are doing early? No.
So meaning that they finish induction early?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no.
Well, because I thought, Audrey, I'm just saying, that's me, Janice. Hello, everybody.
Hi.
So glad to be here. Audrey, just quickly, because I thought you said this is like a new authorization or add-on to the credential. Did you say that? Or is because they move into and they become paras. So
Right.
I'm just wondering, since they've had all that other experience and you're working with the induction or you're the induction coordinator, is there any way they could do early completion?
Yeah, no, and really, they're just another layer of residency support. They're not doing any of the induction work yet. And although Cal State San Marcos has, they're dual credentialed, the other IHEs that we use, they're right out of their BA coming into a credential program. So, they don't do any pointed induction work at that time. It's really about support about their practice because they're not really even teaching until May or April.
Right. And I think, Janice, and correct me if there are some programs, Audrey, that do have, because they've had such a robust program that they can, some are getting early completion options in induction. So I
didn't even know.
Yeah, well, we can do another conversation about that. There are some programs that they count that residency years like really robust prep, and that as they're entering, they clear the credential and they're entering induction, that they're able to complete induction a year early because they've had all of these supports in place. But there are programs out there that do that. So Janice, is that what you're referring to? Okay.
But I know I see Connie in there, and Connie Connie is very well aware of our induction program. I think that there's just not enough. The work is really about, walking alongside and observing and being a para for the first 6 months, and then walking in and being the student teacher, the resident, because really you're learning about the culture, you know, the students, their IEPs, all of that. You're really getting the time to really have a year-long student teaching opportunity. I would have loved that. And you're making money at the same time. So you're able to live. So I think to do that and then to have them do induction work, I think for our program, I don't think it would work. Do you agree, Connie?
Yeah, I think the para model puts another focus on your program, having the para model. And I do know that every induction program can write up their early completion option for themselves. They can define it for themselves. But I agree with you, Audrey, since they're spending some significant time as a para and really getting into that role, that it may not be the proper program to put that together. But as Brooke said, others have some other things going on, and that it can happen.
And it would be it is a little challenging. So I've worked with other programs that do that. When we're planning our coursework in the evening that we have to meet, when there are additional induction meetings in the evening that are required, that can be quite challenging to a university that's trying to, you know, create programs for 3 different types of credentials and a master's degree. So we've run into a couple of problems there, but yeah, we could probably work the kinks out and figure it out.
It looks like, thank you for that. It looks like there's another question in the chat from Kat. Kat, are you on the call? Just asking. It said, how are you differentiating support for teacher residents?
Yeah, Jody had mentioned something that made me think of that question earlier.
Yeah.
I think, or I believe it was you, about how you're almost creating IEPs for your, right? And
yeah,
maybe speak to that sort of level of differentiation.
So I think I'm kind of greatly involved with my candidates because we are complex in our program and unique, so that I always feel like I have to advocate for our students. No, my students, they've already done TPA. They don't need to, you know, they're already done. So we're always different. But we're okay with that. And also the way I've designed the program, they get multiple subjects. So they've done a lot of stuff, and they can do both MMSN and ESN in 1 year. But that requires a much different structure in clinical practice in the fall and the spring, and also like still needing to meet all those requirements of the residency. Like, okay, I have one teacher, but then that teacher needs to hold both credentials, and that classroom needs to be a dual designated classroom. Like all these things we have to hop around to meet all the requirements is very time consuming. So I get very personally involved with each of our candidates, and I'm able to do that because we have a pretty small cohort. You know, we get 20 to 30 people. I can do that. And so Audrey and I will do that together with our residents in Escondido, because we'll look at, okay, which credentials is this candidate getting? Okay, so then we really need to focus on MMSN in the fall. And so she needs to spend more time doing this, more time with this mentor. I need, you know, like we really kind of create the program basically for these students based on what school they're at, what the credentials their teacher has, what experiences they can get at that site. And it looks totally different for another one. Oh, this one's at a middle school in a C's classroom. Well, that's going to look so different. And I really need her to also see more traditional ESN classrooms if she's also going to get an ESN credential. And Audrey's like, no problem, we'll make that happen. And so it is about like getting multiple people on board to kind of create a very differentiated experience. So like I'm thinking about 2 of my residencies, and they have very different experiences, but they're in the same residency program at the same district, getting the same credentials. But their supports are very different, mostly based on what school they're at and what we have access to at that school.
And it's definitely, you know, Jody provides the recipe. This is what we need. And then we figure out, okay, where can we make that happen? And, you know, hey, would you like to be a mentor? Because if sometimes they're not, but they don't know enough about it. As soon as we tell them about it, it's good.
Yeah, and they're often our grads, so it's like, oh, she better say yes, because you know, I know, you know. So it's like a big family. It's like, oh yeah, of course that'd be an excellent mentor. We credentialed them, you know, 10 years ago. So it is, because most of our candidates stay in the region, and a lot of them stay in Escondido. So because we're right there, so it's pretty easy.
Amazing. Thank you for that. And yeah, I think you shared a data point. It was like 86% of your residents are like true grow your own.
Our candidates, yeah.
Or
So,
candidates.
yeah, they stay in our region. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, we have time, just a few more minutes. If anyone has any additional questions, you can come off mute, or I don't know how I want to open this one up, or you can throw it in the chat. And then we'll get ready for a break after this. But I really appreciate you both sharing your NODA program with us. I think it's amazing. And we saw some chatter in the chat that Kelly's like, will this work for us? And so, Connie, it looks like you have a coaching call coming up to see if this model will fit for others.
And I
Yep.
mean, that's how we got here. I mean, I went to a meeting, I went to a residency symposium, and I met Fresno. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what we need to do. We went to visit them, and here we are today. You know, everybody is doing amazing things, and it's what fits for you.
And I will say the dual credentials, I think I support them so much because it just makes a teacher who stays in the profession longer, who is the master of curriculum and the master of access. But it's very hard to sell that program to students. They're like, what? How long? How many credentials? Like, no. But if I have things like residency programs, they're like, oh, okay, I'm getting paid. I can do it then. So it's critical to do as much as we can to get residents supported for both credentials. Because right now it's very difficult for me to find a residency that I can do multiple and special ed together. It's very challenging. So I would put it to this as a home fund, figure out how we can support our candidates to get dual credentials within this residency model for maybe a little longer than a year, if necessary, to support them. So that's my 2 cents. So good luck. We can do it.
Kelly, I saw you unmute, and then we have 2 questions in the chat.
Oh no, I unmuted. I just want to say, agree. Amazing. Thank you, Jody, Audrey. And if anything, I just put in, I think after Janice's question, hi Janice. After Janice's question, that's where I did the little side chat that everyone witnessed is how can we I guess replicate or build upon the model that you have with for Janice's program, the SFUTR program, of which we are one of the IHEs for. So,
well, we're all in this network, so there's always opportunities to get connected beyond these networks and deep dives too. So, we've got 2 questions in the chat. We have like 1 minute left. So there's, for a dual credential program candidate, which TPA does the candidate usually choose? Jody, could you?
Yes, and currently in our program, they do multiple subject because that is the first credential that they do. And so CCTC advised us that they do that one because just in case they decide to leave the program, they've at least completed the TPA requirement. So TPA is done in multiple subject year 1, same with all the other kind of requirements. We have signature assignments in our program for mild, moderate, ESN that kind of look like TPAs, but officially CCTC says 1 and done. Thank you, CCTC. So that candidates only have to go through that once.
Okay. And last question, and then we'll wrap this question up and we'll go to break from here. So with mentoring happening in different contexts, how do you support mentorship development?
So it's the same, just like a mentor for our induction program, the same supports for our residents are also for our mentors. We pull our mentors out. We, our coordinator of our induction program, Heather Peterson, she works with the mentors to talk about how do you have those difficult conversations? How do you, mentor them through and work them through our residents through issues or questions or times that they're having difficulty. So we probably do between 3 to 5 pull out on a given month for those mentors, just to let them talk, let them learn from each other. We take them through, and it's all that PDs for them as well. And so I think that's one of the reasons why we had 30 the next time, because I realized they were getting a lot of support for not only themselves and their teaching, but how to mentor even they can use that same work for their paras. So
That was a great question, and I think a fantastic way to end up this this panel. Mentor, we're always talking about how to support our mentors, so I appreciate learning more about that too. Well, thank you both very much for spending the morning with us and letting us learn a little bit more about your program. And we're looking forward to, well, symposiums coming up, so hopefully we can all connect. And again, thank you, Audrey and Jody, and look forward to seeing you all soon.
All right, so wonderful. Welcome everyone back from the break. And thank you again for that fantastic panel, both to Brooke for facilitating and for our two panelists for just showing such wonderful examples of, what a really inclusive residency program can look like. And also just kind of contextualizing for us some of those different like asset categories that we looked at prior to the break. And so for the second breakout room, you're going to be looking at workshop B. So if you have the worksheet B. So if you have the doc pulled up for you, it's under the second tab. And now that we've had an opportunity to identify some assets in your program that can be leveraged, let's turn our attention to some opportunities for refinement. And I want to offer 3 low-lift refinement strategies that you can apply quickly to start to really gain some momentum for this work. The first option for refinement that I'd love to offer is repurposing something that already exists. So a course assignment, a seminar discussion, a mentor structure. An example of this could be, say, a general education methods course already requires students to submit lesson plans. But the refinement that could be added on top of that is the assignment is updated so that residents have to identify and apply to IEP accommodations to be embedded into the instruction. Or maybe you reformat the lesson plan template that they're going to be using to specifically ask folks to identify different accommodations for students. The second option for refinement that I'd love to offer is scaffolding responsibility. So creating a really clear progression where residents are going to move from observing to practicing with support to eventually independently leading a part of this work. An example of this could be, that first residents are going to be observing an IEP meeting. Then with support from their mentor, they're going to help planning a portion of the meeting to eventually facilitating a piece of that meeting on their own. And then a third option for refinement that I'd love to offer is clarifying roles and responsibilities and really making it explicit in terms of who's going to be responsible for coaching or teaching what particular skill throughout a component of the program. And so an example of this could be, mentor teachers and residency faculty agree that the general education residents will review IEP accommodations during lesson planning meetings. That'll be something that's like structured into those meetings and then discussing how they are going to implement them. In your handout, also, you'll see lots of different examples of just what these different options for refinement could look like. But again, we really just want to give you that shared collaborative time with your Java-like peers back in the same breakout rooms that you were in earlier to talk through what are some of the different options for refinement that you would really like to take back to your teams and implement immediately as a result of being a part of this experience today. So we'll be in our breakout rooms for about 20 minutes. That's going to hopefully allow enough time for a really fruitful conversation and then also hold some time for questions and answers before we wrap up today. So if any questions do pop up as you're having your conversation, just save those for the Q&A time that we'll have next. Incredible opportunity for us to shape or maybe reshape these norms early on in folks' career, so that just becomes what is natural to them and not something that has to be learned in practice. And so I just want to say a big thank you to all of you for letting me partner with you in this experience to help strengthen inclusive preparation in your program as we prepare our next generation of teachers to go into classrooms and create more inclusive opportunities for students with IEPs.
Thank you, Allegra. And as you guys are closing out and I know you're getting ready to leave, we're going to ask that you please complete a feedback form. Just let us know how we did, how you might need more, where you might need more support as we're designing the last session. And the last session is going to be in a little bit less than a month, April 6th. I know the last two sessions here are kind of close together, but that was intentional because then we can get all that learning in before the end of the year, and before people start designing for their programs for next year. So, oh, and I know there's not a slide in here, but the symposium is coming up on the resources page. There is a link to the registration. Here we go. I will put that in the chat as well. And we hope you will join us this year at the symposium, which will be in Sacramento, April 30th and May 1st. And thank you all so much for joining us.